Hey guys, welcome to Growth on the Daily, the personal development podcast for athletes. My name is Ray. I'm a former competitive hockey player. I'm passionate about self-growth, and I'm here to support you on your journey to becoming the best version of you. This week, we have a Real Talk interview with Michael Morgan. Michael and I crossed paths a few years back at UofT. Had to have him on the show. He's been a long-time supporter of Growth on the Daily, so super excited when he said he was down to come on for an interview. Just for some background, Michael Morgan is a former University of Toronto varsity athlete. He has 4 years of experience playing with the men's rugby team. Growing up, he played an array of sports to diversify his skills in order to find his true passion. Michael's also not new to the challenges of adversity and perseverance faced by athletes, as he has learned to embrace the role of the underdog. Today, Michael continues to stay physically and mentally active and is constant search for his next challenge, both within sports and in life. So thank you, Michael, for joining the show. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. And I appreciate you having me here. It's really inspirational, and I really like what you're doing.
I appreciate it, man. You know, athletes, we got to do what we got to do to continue to support the community, right? And this is my way of doing it, but you're also doing your part too with being here today. So, you know, the thanks goes both ways. But let's get started. Why don't you tell our listeners here in the Growth on Daily community, share with them your story. Like, where'd you come from? Why are you here today?
Yeah, so I was born in Ukraine, in the capital of Kiev, and I immigrated to Canada when I was like 3 years old. So coming to a new country, I kind of saw a lot of challenges in trying to fit in and trying to understand, how to get around. So through sports, I found that was a really good way to kind of understand not only new sports to try, but also to really kind of get a fit for understanding the culture and just the way of life in Canada. I lived all over Canada, and I grew up playing a ton of sports. I mean, soccer, basketball, football, rugby. I did boxing, etc. So I really kind of got a feel for a whole variety of different sports, and that kind of shaped me to get an understanding of the athlete that I am today, but also the person.
That's amazing. I love that. And what brought you then to rugby?
So I never really knew much about rugby until high school. One of my football coaches, and football was the sport that I was most passionate about, but he was also the coach for the rugby team, and he asked me to play. And originally, I thought rugby was kind of a funny sport. I never really, like I mentioned, I didn't know much about it, and I just kind of brushed it off until one day he convinced me to come out to the tryout. And, next thing you know, I kind of fell in love with the sport. And, back in high school, I saw it as an off-season training, but as I played it during my undergrad, I did not regret sticking with this particular sport, and it kind of changed a lot of things for me and really brought a lot of good things in my life.
That's awesome. So what are you up to now?
So now I am fully graduated. I no longer play for University of Toronto, but I still stay in contact with a local team in my hometown, and I occasionally play with them, just kind of come out for a few games in the season. But I also am making sure that I stay fit. I'm constantly, trying to find new challenges in sports, whether it's within the gym or just trying out a new sport altogether, just making new goals for myself.
No, I can relate to that. I don't know how you found it, but it's a transition for sure. You're constantly training, you got that performance mindset, and then you're just living, right? So you need to figure out how
Yeah.
to stay fit and what new things you can try. So I feel you on that. That's awesome. As you're probably reflecting on, your athletic career, your previous experiences, given that, what's brought you here today?
Yeah, so when I really sit back and reflect about all the years that, I've played different sports and everything that I've had to overcome, I'm really kind of brought back to the notion of an underdog. My whole life, I felt like I was an underdog in sports. I always had a nothing to lose but everything to gain mentality. It really drove me to try harder than anyone else on the field, both on and off the field, because I found that it truly is the best feeling to overcome the things that people say you cannot do. And I found that was very repetitive throughout my athletic career. The whole idea of an underdog kind of shaped me to be the person I am today. But even though my rugby career might be over for playing at a high level, the things I'm going to take for my whole life and my 4 years at UofT and all, I'm going to take that forever, and that's going to stick with me.
I love that. And I feel like that's true for most athletes, where everyone has those takeaways that just go so much further than the sport itself and just impact your life as a whole. So I know you're getting to that, but let's take a step back here. What even adopted an underdog mindset for you? Like you said, you've had that your whole athletic career. Where did that start?
Sports has always been a part of my family. I mean, my dad played some soccer growing up, but it never reached a high level. And immigrating to Canada, there was so much on the plate that sports almost seemed like just an activity, like a hobby to do on the side. And I feel as though I was the first person in my family to really incorporate sports into my life as a full-time gig. And because I come from an area where there isn't too much experience within sports, I always found like I had to not only study the sport off the field, but kind of had to push myself to really perform at the level that I want to and to try and outmatch my competition.
So where did that mindset or notion of achieving excellence or, getting that full-time gig out of a sports career, where did that stem from?
I'm coming from a family that really had to fight for everything they had. So I think that kind of instilled some fire in me. Sports was a perfect gateway to kind of use that fire to progress myself. Growing up, I wasn't the most athletic kid, but I would struggle to really kind of grasp not even being the best, but just being the average player. And then if I found something that I really had a passion for, then I would really take that fire and take that drive and just repeat it constantly. I felt like I would have to work a little bit harder than everyone else to try and just get to where I want to be and then do it all over again to try and get to the next level and so on and so on.
I see. So run me through that. What does that look like? What was your process of not only surviving, but succeeding as an underdog?
Coming into UofT, I had already built a foundation. So before I touch on UofT, I want to talk about how I had to build that up in high school and in youth sports. As I mentioned, because I wasn't necessarily the most fit child on the sport teams, I would take it into myself to put in those extra reps and then find gateways into how I could study the sport all the time in ways that I could push myself that goes beyond just training and the practice. I would stay and watch videos on how to get better in the sport, et cetera, et cetera. And I would always want to push myself to go that extra level when I'm doing my individual training. For example, like running long distance, I would always try to build a kilometer next and next because I know that, okay, if I reach one achievement, why can't I reach the next and next? And using that, I kind of applied that into my UofT career. Originally, I was in communication with the football coaches to play on the football team, but it just so happened that there were some complications in my first year, which meant that I wouldn't have been able to play the season for football. So I thought, okay, I played rugby in high school. I love the sport. Why don't I just give it a shot? I DM'd the Instagram account. They invited me to try out as a walk-on, and next thing you know, one thing led to another. And I think that I had a great first tryout, and that kind of solidified my spot on the field. And then I just had to realize, I'm on the team, but that's not enough for me. I have to put in the work, and now I have to get to the next level. I have to try and build size, build speed. I want to get that starter spot. I want to do this and that. I want to be the captain. And that drive really pushed me forward to reach the heights that I didn't even think would be possible.
That's amazing. One theme I'm really seeing with you, and not even just your athletic career, but I think your personality as an individual, is that you're a very resilient person. You're not only, I would say, setting those high expectations, but I don't think it comes from a place where you need to prove yourself to other people. It's about becoming the best you can be for yourself. And that is not only a big part of what we talk about on the show, but also a big part of adopting that healthy athletic identity. So I have so much respect for you for that. On that note, I would love to hear about your top achievement as an athlete, or in your view.
First of all, thank you for those words. In regards to my biggest achievements, so I think one would be the reality of saying that I was able to reach, athletic heights and levels where a lot of people told me I wouldn't even make half the road of where I went to. And that alone is probably one of the biggest achievements. Just seeing my athletic dreams come true.
That's amazing. I'm very curious about handling external, let's just call them haters, and telling you, I know you have this mindset that's great and you're trying hard, but reality check, you're not going to get there. And that's just their opinion. And obviously that's not the outcome, but how did you deal with that?
I mean, I've had coaches tell me that I wouldn't reach the places that I have, and I've had friends, I had teachers tell me that it's time for me to drop sports and focus on something else. But really, it's kind of believing in yourself and knowing what you're capable of. It's really the confidence in knowing that you know that you can reach that. I had the mentality that, okay, maybe they're right, but I wouldn't know until I try for myself. I would love to hear also about your experience too, playing hockey, about how you were able to reach your goals despite what anybody else tells you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can definitely relate to your elements there of, whoever it is, coaches, friends, other people saying either it's unrealistic or, you're not going to get there. And I really like the point you made that, so what? Like, even if they think that, so what? And I think that's a big difference in mindset, because I feel like you can really look at it two ways. You can look at it and say, they're right, so I shouldn't do this. But you could also look at it as the way you said it is, they might be right, and so what if they're right? That doesn't mean that I shouldn't try. And I think that just goes back to fear of failure and overcoming that, because I would rather try something and it not work out than wonder what if it did. For me, in hockey, I got to a point where in my second last year, going into my last year of my midget level with hockey, I was like, okay, I can go on some like random juniors team and ride the bench to say that I play junior. Or I could be a starter on a solid AA team. And I'm like, that's the difference between me playing varsity and getting scouted for some school and me not. And I was like, well, aside from the lack of opportunities in female sports professionally, let's just put that aside. What do I really want to do? And I was like, I want to play. I don't want to train to sit. I want to play. That coach, he asked me one question and I will never, ever forget it. He said, do you want to play hockey or are you a hockey player? And I think that was the time that I had to make the decision of, is this my identity or am I just here for fun? And once that clicks, it's just like you said, tunnel vision, focus, and it's your life. And so that is, at least for me, what that was like, overcoming the mindsets. But like you, I feel like there was a lot of internal and external elements to that underdog mindset.
And it seems like you chose to play for yourself, and that's the most important, because you're not being a hockey player for them, but you're being a hockey player for yourself and for the sport, and that's the most important.
I feel like, you know what, that's actually a really great point. And thank you for that, because, a lot of kids, especially hockey, but other sports as well, like parents, they're throwing you into sports, right? You don't make the decision at 4 or 5. There comes a point in every youth athlete's career where they decide if it's really what they want to do. And I feel like once you make that decision and you're like, this is part of who I am, that's the difference in the mindset of what it takes to get where you're trying to go. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, of course. I would love to talk about also the mental barrier, trying to find that underdog drive, what it could lead. I mean, for me personally, I found that, throughout my whole life, I created this mental barrier of like self-appreciation, which is difficult. I always felt like I reached this point where this isn't enough, like I'm not enough. I have to do better. And then I was driving myself to extreme levels of training and just really pushing myself to a point where I'm overdoing what I need to do to get better. It really is almost like walking a fine line between finding what is that point where to really push yourself and where are you actually only making it worse for yourself. And that was something I was struggling with for a while. The more I got to understand who I am and my body and what kind of athlete I am, then I was able to really gain an appreciation and understanding of where I should be. And I was able to keep that drive, but also focus on where I need to put those efforts. And I found that taking that into my own life outside of sports, into work, into socializing, and really any other hobbies, I can keep that sort of same mentality and eventually turn it into something positive and something I can use for the future.
I love that. I think that's a very great way of putting that. I think everyone at some point goes through that sort of mental battle where you're just like so hard on yourself and you might not even realize you're hard on yourself. And because you're so hard and those expectations are so high, you might be thinking like, I'm lazy or I'm not doing enough, or like, why am I not reaching XYZ? And, something that I definitely struggle with and I'm trying to figure out is handling my perfectionism. I'm very much a perfectionist. It's funny because I didn't even realize I was a perfectionist until someone else pointed it out. And then I started to look at myself and say, hey, wow, like chill. Especially with sports and activity, it's like, oh, you're burnt out from school or work and you're skipping a workout, but then you're hard on yourself for skipping on a workout because you're like, but I'm trying to be captain of this and I'm trying to be a starter and like that's not going to happen if I skip. And all you're doing is skipping one workout because you're drained and you're exhausted. And actually, your body and your mind probably would benefit more from the rest so that you can perform better the rest of the days. But, there's this mindset that it's just like you got to be always on. And the second you kind of take your foot off the gas, it's as if it's done. And once you realize that there needs to be a balance between putting your foot on the gas and putting your foot on the brake, you realize that you're coasting at a speed that's actually going to take you further. Relating that back to hockey and my career there, that looked like training efficiently and not overtraining, but also adjusting my expectations. I don't mean lowering, I really mean adjusting by saying, what do I actually want rather than what are other people influencing me to do? So going back to playing for yourself, right? So I don't know if you can relate to that, but that's at least my mentality.
You brought up a good word when you mentioned perfectionist. I think it's important that every high level athlete, I think it's inevitable, and I think it actually is an important trait to be a perfectionist in your field, but to not take that to a point where it's unhealthy. You have to find that balance into being a perfectionist, into perfecting the most that you can do, but not putting yourself in a position of someone else or trying to create an unhealthy lifestyle for yourself.
It seems to me like no matter the background, no matter the sport, athletes have a lot in common, and especially that mental battle and coming to meet their own expectations, right? I love everything that you shared with us today. It's honestly been so great speaking with you. I'm not only learning more things about you, but also myself and seeing how that all comes together, which is great. But I know that our listeners are definitely wondering how they can apply this to their own lives. So I would love for you to share any advice you have for our listeners in the Growth on the Daily community and how they can not only overcome being an underdog, but also driving that self-made achievement.
I'll keep it simple. I think that you really have to understand that what you're doing, it shouldn't be for anyone else. It should be for you. And that as an underdog, you're already at the point where, okay, you truly do have nothing to lose, but you have everything to gain. So why not try to reach that next level? And why not try and set your sights to something of what may not seem realistic, but I promise you that if you believe that it is and you believe that you can achieve it, then you really could. And one thing that I can really recommend is a book by David Goggins called Can't Hurt Me. After I read it, it flipped a switch. David Goggins has a really good way of putting the feelings that you get as an underdog athlete into reality and into his experience, and then you can take that and apply it to yours. So that's something I definitely recommend to read as well.
That's great. I love that piece of advice and also a book recommendation. I'm a big reader, especially on that self-development and improvement topic. So it's great. And yes, that's a great bestseller. So highly recommend that as well. Well, I want to say, Michael, thank you. It's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast and another Real Talk interview here. So thank you so much for coming on and looking forward to our future endeavors and seeing what you continue to achieve going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. It was really a pleasure. And, we're just keeping it real.
Only way to do it. All right, guys, that wraps up this week's episode on the Growth on the Daily podcast and our Real Talk segment with Michael Morgan. If you guys like this interview, check out Michael Morgan on Instagram. I'll throw his handles down in the show notes. And of course, check out our Instagram at Growth on the Daily and our website, growthonthedaily.com, for more info. And I'll see you guys next week.